AJ and Lou, just so you know, and then get going.
I think that's us. That's us
Great. Thanks. Hi everyone, welcome to the Travellers panel, or a bit more like a Travellers chat today at the Edinburgh Anarchist Feminist Book Fair 2021. If you're joining us for the first time, please take a moment to look over our Safer Spaces agreement, which is available to read on our website. I'll post a link in the chat just now. And the website you can also check out, on our website you can also check out the book fair's stalls and the full programme for the weekend. As ever, the book fair is made possible by people giving us their time and their labour. All donations we take go directly to the speakers and organisations taking part. So if you can, please consider donating via our PayPal. Again, I'll drop the link in the chat. We're always keen to hear feedback about how we can improve the book fair next year and make our programming and our spaces more accessible. If you have thoughts you'd like to share after the event, please drop us a line via the feedback page on the website. Thank you for coming, everyone, and we'll get started. So today we've got speakers from No Fixed Abode Travellers Collective and supporters, and from Travellers Against Fascism. Our speakers today are Lou and AJ. So I'll just say a bit to introduce the panel. The state has challenged travellers' right to exist for hundreds of years. Discrimination, fear and mistrust of traveller communities is deeply woven into the culture of the UK. Traveller communities are more likely to be targeted by police, with many facing hostility from neighbouring communities and attempts to remove them. The erasure of common land and new laws proposed in Parliament threaten travelling communities and attempt to criminalise the nomadic way of life. Traveller identities contain many different ethnic groups with nomadic traditions, such as Romani and Irish travellers, as well as communities that still travel as a way of life today. Being a traveller does not necessarily mean you are living outside of bricks and mortar accommodation. So, Lou, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about No Fixed Abode Travellers Collective and supporters?
Hi, I'm Lou. I'm a traveller. I wasn't born on the road. I've been living in a vehicle, trucks, caravans, various different vehicles over the last 20 years now. And I'm part of a group called No Fixed Abode Travellers and Supporters. And we've been campaigning against the criminalisation of trespass and the right to roam for a few years now. We're a collection of individuals who are, many of us are travellers, be it living roadside, living horse-drawn, in boats or benders even. And we also have members who have been on the road before, who are now living in bricks and mortar. And so basically we've come together to campaign against the new laws that are coming out that are making it more difficult or illegal for us to live a nomadic lifestyle. In the past we've tended to go to different events, different festivals and gigs to promote like the positive aspects of all travelling communities. We educate others on the past history of travelling people and the present situation of travelling people. And we aim to engage with other people outside of the travelling community to reduce prejudice against us. And what we're hoping to do, what we're aiming to do is to work with other groups and individuals to create a united force of people campaigning together, because the way that we are going to win this fight is to unite together, you know. And also we're against all forms of fascism, racism, prejudice and bigotry. You know, we'd like to see the end to the stereotypical ideas of travellers, and that we're a problem. You know, I hear that too many times, the traveller problem, or how are we going to solve the traveller problem? Well, we're not a problem, we're just actually very, very much neglected by the authorities. There's no site provision, there's so many things that we're being failed at, and actually we're a very, very creative and self-sufficient force. You know, we don't really need a lot, but at the moment we're being stereotyped and demonized a lot of the time as something that's stealing off the society or bludgeoning off society, when actually we're quite capable to manage ourselves if we were just given a bit of land and a bit of time to do what we need to do. I don't know, yeah. But, yeah, so yeah.
Thank you for introducing. AJ, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and Travellers Against Fascism?
Yeah, well, my background is, my dad's side of the family are Irish travellers, from Wicken, County Cork via Cheshire and Cornwall. And on my mum's side, there's partial Romany, ancestry on there as well. So I grew up settled. There's my granddad's generation that settled, but I ended up living no fixed abode myself for a while. I was a squatter as well. Travellers Against Fascism sort of arose just me from setting up a Facebook page in 2018 because I'd been an anti-fascist activist for a while, and I felt there was a sort of a lack of focus on traveller issues and Romany issues within the anti-fascist left at the time. So it literally just started me setting up a Facebook page to just vent and to talk about things I didn't think were talked about much, and it's sort of grown into a sort of a small affinity group that's mostly in the home counties at the moment. But I suppose we would ask about our future focus. Well, we're going to continue going to demos, going to continue speaking at events, and hopefully grow a bit. So we've got a proper full-blown, crew together. Yeah, we're definitely looking to work together with other traveller activists and other Romany activists to, oppose the crap that this government's given us, really. That's all there is to it.
Thanks for introducing yourself. So I'll move on to kind of the first question, which is a bit of a big question. So I imagine probably spend a little while on it. The Tory party proposed the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill in March this year, which aims to increase police powers as well as target traveller communities with punitive measures such as fines up to £2,500 and 3 month prison sentences for unauthorised encampments, the seizure of vehicles and trailers at the discretion of the police, and the sale of vehicles and trailers to pay fines. This law would make residing on land without consent and or with a vehicle a new offence. And I suppose just to kind of open the discussion around this, how would this affect traveller communities?
Well, I think one thing that people aren't really talking about, but what it seems like to me is that it's an act of cultural genocide, because you've got this act where you're trying to wipe out the traditional way of living of multiple ethnic groups, where you're going to confiscate their homes, you're going to put them in jail, you're probably going to end up with a load of traveller kids being put into care and sent to settled families as well, because if let's say you're a single mother, you live in a caravan with your child, you get put in jail, you don't have anywhere to live anymore. Who's going to look after your kid? It's not going to be you. So I'm seeing a lot of parallels here with not only previous anti-traveller legislation, where I mean, for a period of a few hundred years, from Queen Mary to Queen Victoria, you could literally be punished with death for being Romany. So I'm seeing parallels of that, where you're criminalising the traditional way of living for entire ethnic groups that just so happens to be ones that you don't consider to be part of sort of mainstream British culture, or what the government wants to portray as mainstream British culture. And the effect is literally going to be seismic. It's going to ruin thousands of people's lives just the moment it's passed.
Lou, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, the scale of the implications of this law, if it gets passed, is quite horrendous. It is cultural genocide, or an attempt at cultural genocide. At the moment, I do have a pitch on a settled site. It's not a legal site, but it has been there for a long time. But at the moment, I'm traveling around the country, and I've just been stopping. for a different site in the last month. We've been through one big eviction, And we've moved on to a new bit of land, which is, I think, council owned, and you know, and we're here for a bit, you know. But if this law was passed, then what could have happened was the police could have turned up. They could have threatened us. It's not even that the way the law is changing now is that they're saying that you can be, the reason the police have the powers to move you on if there is a likelihood to cause disruption, damage, or distress. And the law is so vague, you know, you don't actually have to have done anything, you know. And if one of the neighbours complains, oh, you're distressing me because your dog's barking, or you've disrupted the traffic, or something like that, then basically you basically are committed, could be seen as committing a criminal offence, and then you could lose your home, you know. And this is a really, you know, this is our homes. We move with them. We pay council, we pay road tax, we pay insurance, we pay for the MOT. We have to keep our, you know, this is our homes. This is everything we have with us, and we're really vulnerable, you know. It's like, to be in that situation where you have a choice of staying and risking your home is, and as AJ said, risking your family. If you're a mother and you get told you have to move, if you don't move and you lose your home, then you're homeless, and then you're seen as incapable of taking care of your children, and your kids could go into care. If you lose your home, you know, I've had a vehicle confiscated from me before. It was heartbreaking, you know. It was my own fault, but it was you know, I was homeless, you know. Luckily my community was there for me. You know, it's decimating to the way that we live, you know. And the thing is as well is that there is no other provision for us, and the provision that's there on offer isn't acceptable. I mean, at the moment, the police do have the powers to do all of these things. It's part of Section 61, the 1994 Criminal Justice Bill, but they don't use these powers because the idea is that they would have to be an alternative place for us to move on to, and at the moment the government isn't providing anywhere for us to move on to at all, and this is one of the main issues. So, and also as well, you know, if you look at the beautiful things that can be created when people occupy land that's just been left neglected, or occupy buildings, incredible projects can happen because people have that time and space to work on the things they need to do. And that will be lost, you know, and people will move off the road or move out of the country, and then you'll lose an amazing creative force of people that bring so much pleasure to this country in music, in art, in all aspects. In you know, our skills are incredible. You know, we have so much to offer.
You touched on it briefly. Oh, sorry, you go ahead, Jay.
No, I just wanted to add on a quick statistic I've got with regards to police powers. In 2019, the Police Federation did some internal polling on these exact proposed powers, and 84% of officers said they didn't want them, they didn't need them, that current powers are sufficient, and the majority of them said that the main problem was a lack of site provision. Because again, you can very easily move people on as a police officer if there's somewhere else for those people to go. So literally, if there aren't any real major problems right now, the only thing you need to do to solve them would be to provide more sites, because people will go to sites if they're available.
Yeah, it's definitely something, and from what I've read about it, you know, a lot of the sites that, when they do provide sites, are overcrowded and often lacking in just kind of basic facilities that you would need to, you know, maintain the site as well, so they don't even give the opportunity to actually it kind of ties into the next question, which you sorry, stuttering, I'm a bit nervous. You touched on briefly about the state's kind of interference with traveller communities, and it's got a really, really long disgusting history of taking, effectively snatching children from traveller families, which is beyond legislation directly attacking traveller communities. How has the state interfered with the lives of travellers? How does it continue to do so today?
On the case of, you know, the state taking children, there was actually an international incident regarding that, you know, in the first half of the 2010s, because it turned out that a number of Slovakian Romani women who'd, you know, migrated to the UK had their children fraudulently taken away from them by social services. There's one case I remember reading about where, you know, a woman was there, you know, visiting her child with social services, and her child needed changing. There was absolutely nowhere in the building for her to change a child other than the floor. There's no tables, there's no anything. Now, if she hadn't have changed her child, the social services would have marked that up against her and said she was a bad mother. Yet because she changed her child on the floor because there's no alternative, they also marked that against her. It was a lose-lose situation. They deliberately contrived to give an excuse to take the children away from this poor woman. And in the end, the Slovakian government got onto us, said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I think some of the children may have ended up going back to their mothers, but, you know, the damage is already done by that point. So this is something that we've been doing for a long time, and it's something we've been doing recently, even without this bill. The only difference now is that this bill, you know, gives the government the chance to do that legally to people who are born in this country and who are citizens of this country. There's broadening the scope of what they were already doing to nomadic minorities.
Can I add to that as well? Is I actually have worked in child protection, and I support a number of families who have had their children removed or are trying to get special guardianship of their children. And in the new traveller community, I know a number of grandmothers who have tried to get access to become special guardians. And basically the court has ruled against them and taken the children away because they've considered that they've also, even when families have come off the road, it's still not been good enough. They've our children are being taken away from us, and this is going on for decades and decades. We're being judged for the way we bring up our children because we live in vehicles, not because to do with our parenting skills. And it's also about meeting the criteria of the settled population, as opposed to recognizing that actually our culture and our communities are part of how we raise our children. We're very traditional cultural way of raising children where the community is involved, and there doesn't seem to be any recognition of this. In fact, it's deemed as a bad mark against us by the social services and the authorities. And it's really worrying. It's really worrying that this happens.
Definitely. And the way that traveling communities raise their children is almost used as a kind of stick to beat entire communities with. I've got another question here about the Department of Education statistics showed that traveller children are more than twice as likely to be excluded from school, alongside facing higher rates of bullying from their peers. So it's also even within schools, when travellers send their children to schools, they still get abused there. How are traveller communities excluded from accessing resources such as healthcare, education, and community services?
Well, I think the things I've noticed whilst I've been on the road, if you are waiting for an appointment for a procedure, or if you are, say, wanting to access therapeutic services, there might be a 6-month waiting list. By that point, you've moved out the area. It can be very hard to to make a lot of the time the site provisions or the places where we have to live, they're on the outskirts of towns. They're in the middle of nowhere where there's no public transport, and so sometimes making appointments can be difficult. Even registering at a GP, you know, like, they have to take us on. They have an obligation to take us on. But when I've lived in areas where there is like an already a settled kind of travelling community on site there, then when I've tried to go and join on the local surgery, I've been fobbed off. Oh no, we're full up, whatever. And, you know, not being able to get a cervical smear, you know, that is really frustrating. I mean, it's difficult enough for everybody at the moment, but as a traveller, if you are moving, it'd be nice to be able to access services and not be discriminated against. And with schools, it's a difficult one. I mean, the traveller liaison enforcement people, if you want to get your kids in school, then they're really eager to help you get into school. But whether or not it's a safe place for our children to be, that's a different matter. I know when I was at Dale Farm, the travellers there, they were saying that one of the reasons they loved it was because the school was predominantly made up of their children, and their children felt safe, but they would not feel safe to put their kids into a school where there was just one or two travellers, because they know that they would face abuse and bullying and prejudice.
Yeah, I went to one of those schools where there was only one or two travellers. Yeah, I mean, for the first half of my time there, nobody knew I was a traveller. But there was one kid who I was friends with there. His name was Joe. He was a traveller who just recently settled, and he was also a tiny ginger kid. And they whipped the absolute shit out of him. Like, it was merciless the way they treated him, and he ended up dropping out midway through year 8. And you know, I personally started getting some racial abuse, you know, being called pikey and stuff like that, when people found out about my own personal background. And you know, I've never at that point I never lived on the road. I'd only ever lived you know, in houses and flats. Yeah, people, you know, didn't care about that. It was an ethnic thing. It was a racial thing. It was because I was from an ethnic group that had those stereotypes about it. They would assume that of me and call me these names. When that was something they never assumed about me before, and the sort of accusations they'd throw at you are things that I'd never personally done. Yet the moment they found out that was, you know, my family, everything changed just with how people treated me. I went to school in, you know, it was a comprehensive school. It was in a village in Berkshire, so you can imagine exactly what the kids there were like.
Yeah. I suppose I should just say now as well, we've got a bit of a delay on the YouTube, so if you would like to, members of the audience would like to ask questions, you can drop them into the comment section of the YouTube live stream. And we've got one from Pink Peacock, which is a queer anarchist Jewish cafe in Glasgow, asking that they would love to hear about how we can support against proposed legislation and more general police abuse against travellers. If you've got anything to say on that one.
I would suggest going on the Friends Family of Travellers website. They have prepared a generic letter that you fill in your name and your postcode if you're fixed abode, and it pulls up your MP, and then you tick whether you're a traveller or a supporter of travellers, and then it will send a generic letter to your MP asking them to vote against this criminalisation of trespass. I would also suggest contacting your MP yourself and saying why you feel that this is important issue that needs to be addressed. And then the NFATS collective, we have a webpage, www.mfats.info, and there's a lot of information on there. So if you want to check that out, then that might be a way to direct yourself.
I don't really have much to add to that, other than, you know, whenever you see any Kill the Bill demos going on, you know, go along if you can. try and provide some exposure to the traveller elements of a bill as well, because that's something that again tends to get ignored. I mean, it's a horrific enough bill even without that, but when you add that into it, it's just, yeah. I think people tend to overlook it. So just keep raising awareness, keep going to actions if there's any locally, and just keep up the pressure, because the government, they've delayed their passage of the bill. They're hoping that we forget about it, that we lose momentum, that we stop trying to oppose this bill. So we need to keep the pressure up, keep the momentum up, keep the energy up, and that's how we're going to defeat this bill.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and from kind of my own experience of kind of trans activism and things like that, I found that often when these kind of things get brought to Parliament and these kind of discussions begin happening, then often there's quite a big uptick, if you will, and kind of like anti-trans sentiment and stuff like that. Do you think that's true for this? Do you think like recently there's been more anti-traveller sentiment because it's kind of so, I don't know what's the word, big at the moment, the police crime sentencing bill?
I just think there's more open anti-traveller sentiment, just because it's giving people an opportunity to talk about it. You know, when it's in the news, suddenly, you know, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to be out there giving their opinion on it, and through that, you can just see how widespread anti-traveller sentiment is.
I mean, I would say, from my experience, when we were at Dale Farm, that was a big campaign to help save the land that the Irish travellers there had bought and paid for and lived on for 10 years. And then the government in Essex, or the council in Essex, they were evicting them, even though they'd bought their own land. They decided that actually it wasn't good enough and they weren't allowed to be there. And there was huge support for the travellers around the country. And then what we started seeing was negative reports about travellers. Suddenly there was a whole issue of slave making travellers, and that just suddenly appeared out of nowhere, not really grounded in anything factual, not really anything to do with the travelling community. This time, I think the first week of the Kill the Bill demo, when that was on, I noticed that there was suddenly loads of reports about dog thefts by travellers, and you start seeing, just at these crucial points, you start seeing these really, really divisive, prejudicial reports coming through that are there to raise tensions and to raise prejudice. On a positive side, one of the ways MFATS has been working, because we haven't had the festival season this year, we've been going out to little bits of common land, and we've been setting up a little camp, having a fire pit, having, just having a really nice site, just for a few days, and giving lots of information out to the local people. And it's really been like an outreach project, going out and talking to the communities. And we went to Wormwood Scrubs. We went there because there was a HS2 camp already, and we knew that the local people were kind of concerned about the way that the governments were acting in lots of different areas. And obviously we set up camp on the first night, and the local group, their Facebook page, they were a bit concerned about us, and we had some local residents come down to check us out. And then the next day, they came back again and said, look, these are the concerns that we've got. And we went through them. They were concerned about our ecological footprint. I mean, we didn't have a generator. We were cooking on a fire. We had solar panel. We weren't having a rave or anything. And then at the end of it, the guy said, I know it sounds like there's a lot of people that are like having a go here, but actually this group's got 200 people and there's only 4 people that are complaining. And actually, we spoke to so many people that weekend. We told them about the bill, because they were already politicized already. They were like, what can we do? Can we write to our MP? They were really happy that we were spreading the actual reality of what this bill is about. So much of it, it's just, you just get the headlines in the news, and nobody really knows what the actual facts are, and how actually, although these are traveller rights, they're also human rights, and that we should all have the right to go and park on the land and to stay on the land and to live nomadically, and not be in bricks and mortar if we choose not to, or if we're able to not to, you know. And so, yeah, waking people up, you know, there is a lot of people out there that aren't prejudiced, which is really, really refreshing to see. They just need to know that we're human.
Yeah. Well, although when it does come to the prejudice, it does go, you know, all the way to the top in terms of the government. I mean, a great example of this would be, you know, Eric Pickles, who was the Tory Communities Minister. And of course, he had overall jurisdiction over, you know, retrospective planning applications, which are applications you send in for planning permission after something's already been built. And the rejection rate for them normally is 20%. Yet in cases where the applicant was traveller or Romany, Eric Pickles called in every single one to his department. The rejection rate went up to 90%. And the High Court found that he'd violated the human rights of, you know, travellers and Romany people through his policy and through his actions in government. In fact, he got absolutely no punishment for it. In fact, his current job under this government is the United Kingdom's special envoy for post-Holocaust issues. This is a guy who was literally found by a court to violate the human rights of one of the groups that was genocided in the Holocaust. And now he's our country's main representative for, you know, remembrance of those events. So you know, people high up in government, they can say any amount of horrific things, do any amount of horrific things when it comes to, you know, nomadic communities, and they'll face absolutely no consequences for it.
Mm-hmm. There was a point that we were talking about earlier, which had kind of never really connected the dots on before, which was the kind of reports of dog theft and things like that. I suppose I wanted to ask do you think there's a kind of element of almost dog whistling, if you know what that is, where you hint at something? It's very common in a lot of kind of fascist and like alt-right spaces, where you have a way of communicating to other people in the know, if you will, without actually explicitly saying it. It's something I've seen before in my own kind of, you know, community of white British people, where travelers will, you know, move into a site peacefully, causing no problems, go out, walk their dog or something like that, and suddenly everyone's paranoid that their houses are going to get broken into. Do you think that there's a kind of element of like dog whistling around like crime and traveling communities?
Well, in this case, it's literally dog whistling.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but
I mean, I've lived in places where we've taken on a bit of abandoned land, and the neighbourhoods have actually been really pleased that we've been there. You know, it's reduced street walking, it's reduced drug use, it's reduced theft in their area. They've even written letters for us when we've been being evicted to back us up, which have just all been ignored. You know, and there's this whole myth that travellers and the settled community can't live together. And actually, you know, I've lived in the middle of nowhere on the top of a hill, and we've all used the local shop. And when they were shutting down the post offices, you know, our local post office was just like saying, we don't know what we're going to do when you're all gone, because you are the ones that use our shops, you know. And now the elderly people that can't go into the town, they can't, they're not going to be able to have access to their local facilities. We sometimes keep communities alive because we do like shop local, and we do like access to communities. One of the things I wanted to say as well, this new place that we've taken, we actually got a letter from the police the other day, reminding us of good moral behaviour and good guidelines for living with the community around us, and how we mustn't antagonise them and we must respect them and everything. And I wonder if they actually get sent, if the people who are living in the houses along the road actually get a letter sent to them, reminding them that actually travellers are human and travellers have a right to be in this place. And there seems to be this double standard that you know, we have to accept what we're given, and we're treated like, you know, like we don't know how to behave. You know, okay, we might make a little bit of noise, but actually lots of people make noise, and actually a lot of us are very quiet, and a lot of us get around you know, we're just human, and there's good and bad in all communities, you know, and it just seems really insane that we're treated so like, you know, like we need to be told how to behave.
Totally, it only ever goes one way, it seems.
Yeah, it's really weird. And
AJ, sorry, you go ahead.
No, carry on.
I was going to say, AJ, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't really have anything to add to that. That summed it up.
Fair enough.
I'd like to add as well, actually, they're in one of the in Bristol where there's a lot of these meanwhile sites at the moment that have sprung up during COVID, where they give us a little bit of land to live on while they're planning or getting permission to do whatever they want to do with it. And these are managed by traveller enforcement I mean, they're meant to be traveller support and enforcement representatives, but their main role seems to be enforcement, which is about evicting us and moving us on or getting us into houses. And what I've been hearing about is the people that are kind of like wardens or the support, they are constantly coming onto site. They are you know, turning up at like in the evening, at night time, checking on people. They've got their favorite people that they'll listen to. And it's like, if you were living in a council house, you wouldn't expect like the council officer to come and say hello on a Friday night when you're socializing with your friends and relaxing at home. But they actually feel they've got this right to come into our communities when we're on an organized site. And this is really weird, and this is really it's really upsetting to a lot of people I know, that there's this invasion of their privacy where it's almost like it reminds me of what happened to the Native American, the First Nation people, when they had the white Americans in their communities watching them all the time. And this is also unacceptable. I mean, why, you know, there's places where there's height barriers, so you're not allowed to have like people with larger vehicles can't come onto site. There's places where you have to pay for your visitors to come and stay for a night. I mean, you know, like, why would you be paying £10 a night to have your aunt and uncle come and stay with you? It's absolutely insane. And we have to bend over backwards just to get these little bits of land that are given to us, with you know, which are quite often very expensive. And you know, we don't actually need a lot of amenities. It's nice to have a water tap, and it's you know, but most of us are on solar power. Most of us have generators if we need them, you know. And we can do all this, and you know, we can build a compost toilet. We don't need like plumbing and whatever, but like, you know, what they give us, it's not really, you know, they never ever talk to us about what we need, as opposed to how we want to do things. It's always about what they presume that they want, because they're used to living in houses. And I'm sorry to use the word they all the time, because I know they're human and everything, but there's no consultation about how travellers actually want to live.
No, I totally get that. Don't worry about saying they. I think it's totally fair. But you're completely right, and that's so much about how, you know, even cities in the world are set up is so. It's just totally inaccessible, or it's constructed to be as inaccessible as possible to people who don't live in a kind of what a lot of, you know, white Britain sees as a conventional way, like the, you know, height barriers you were talking about for vehicles, so you literally just can't get past.
And this reminded me of another bit of legislation that sort of plays into the way that cities themselves were organised, was the Scrap Metal Dealers Act, which I think was in 2011, which was basically using a load of dog whistles about, you know, literally metal being stolen from church roofs to make it much harder to be in the scrap metal business, which is something that, you know, is a traditional, you know, traveller occupation. You know, travellers are definitely overrepresented in the scrap metal industry. And I know somebody in Croydon who was in the industry, and they told me about, you know, how it affects them, because they have a 1 mile journey from, you know, where they'd normally pick up scrap and where they'd normally sell it. And they would go through 3 different boroughs on that journey, just going down one road. And they'd have to apply for a license in each one of those boroughs just to continue doing their job legally. It cost them thousands to do it. But, I mean, there's definitely, I think one of the main weapons the government uses to target travellers is bureaucracy. It's just sort of a Kafkaesque, you know, bureaucracy of 1,000 cuts, just to add more and more charges, more and more little laws that are obscure and not many people know about, just more ways to slip you up, more ways to catch you doing something, well, apparently bad, according to the government. And yeah, it's just none of these bills really ever need to name the group they're targeting. You know which group they're targeting, because they always go for the most stereotypical things as well, things that may even be out of touch nowadays, but because that's the stereotype, because that's how the people making these laws view traveling people, that's the way they target them.
Yeah, you're right. It's just a kind of, it's a coordinated campaign to make life as a traveler basically unlivable. And then when you do slip up on one of these, just, you know, bureaucratic laws get you, then they throw you in prison. And that's why in prison, as you know, travelers are severely overrepresented in the kind of prison populations and stuff like that. We've got another question from someone, which is the level of policing, not just from police, but from enforcement agents in my state agency you face is obscene. How can I directly offer support? How can I challenge this?
I mean, generally, I would say if you're seeing a group of travellers and there is an issue with the police or bailiffs around there, it's always good to ask the travellers if they need support or if they need a witness. If it's a private matter, they'll generally send you on the way and you just can go off on your own and it's not a problem. But if there's an eviction going on, or if they're, you know, or an illegal eviction, then travellers might be grateful if you were to film it, if you know, or potentially, or if you were just to stand by and be to watch to make sure they're okay. You know, obviously it depends. If the group of travellers say no, we're fine, then just go on about your business and leave them to it. But sometimes, you know, the eviction we had the other week, they shut all the roads off and we had people outside to take films, and they pushed everybody off that road, even though their vehicles were parked on the side of the road, so that we had witnesses, and then we were just left with just ourselves, the bailiffs and the police. And the police were meant to be there to prevent a breach of the peace. But they just tended to watch on. They were just chatting amongst themselves, not especially helpful. Occasionally, if we needed them, they came over if we shouted, and you know, and their head officer was there, but they weren't really very helpful. They aren't very supportive, or they haven't been very supportive in the past.
Asia, is there anything you'd like to add?
Again, pretty much summed up what I'd want to say. You know, if you see anything happening, just, you know, offer your help, and if they don't want help, just leave it be, I suppose.
I suppose unless we get any more questions through, I'll move on to the kind of last question of the chat, which is what campaigns are on the horizon for no fixed rate travellers and supporters and travellers against fascism, and if any, are there any resources you would like to share?
Well, there isn't really any big, you know, individual campaigns on Travellers Against Fascism. We're just supporting, you know, other campaigns at the moment, just being present as many things we can be, and trying to use our Facebook page to just, you know, signal boost anything that goes on. So I suppose if you want to know what we're doing, just follow our Facebook page. It's just Travellers Against Fascism, and if we're doing anything, we'll mention it on there. And but if there's one thing I would like to, there's a few things I'd like to actually, you know, signal boost as well. First of all, friends, families, and travellers. You know, they do a lot of great advocacy work. they do a lot to raise awareness. Also, I'd recommend on Twitter following Dr. Cindy Joyce. She's the first traveller in Ireland to get a PhD, and she's one of the foremost academic authorities on Irish traveller history and how the law in Ireland in particular, but also in Britain, affects travelling lives as well. So, that's all I'd like to mention at the moment.
Thanks for that, AJ. Anything you'd like to share, Lou?
Okay, so as I said, MFATs, No Fixed Abode travellers and supporters. We've got a web page, we've got a Facebook group, and if you go onto the NFATs Facebook group, we've got a section for announcements, and that has lots of issues, upcoming stuff, what's happening. Obviously, we are really campaigning against this trespass bill, but we're also looking at the it's basically an open space issue in 2026. Basically there's a move to what's going to happen is they're going to rewrite all the definitive maps of the UK. And this basically, these definitive maps, they show all the footpaths, all the bridleways, all the byways, and all the common land, all our land. And if anything that is not registered by 2026 will actually be removed we'll lose these public rights of way will cease to exist, and we'll lose even more land. I mean, at the moment, I think we've got access to 9% of the land in the UK. I mean, which is abysmal. I mean, most of it's owned by the Crown, the military, the elite, and the church. And so we've got access to 8 or 9%. And so what at the moment there is a move to record any byways, footpaths, bridleways, and common land. So you need to do this. You need to go to your council office, look at the maps, and make a note. There's a whole heap of instructions to do this. It's an organisation called Open Spaces, and there's a book that explains this all called Restoring a Record by Phil Wadey. And it's really important. I don't know if you've ever noticed maybe where supermarkets are, and they, and there's always been like a little walkway that you walk through that's probably been there for hundreds of years, way before the supermarket was there, and then suddenly they're putting a fence up. The byways, a lot of them, you'll be driving along the road in the countryside and you'll see this little track that says restricted byway. A lot of the time they're not actually, we do have rights to access them, but the council have played the landowners. They've said, oh well, if you cover the surfacing of the road, then we'll allow you to put this sign up, which stops people from walking up, from going up there, driving up there. And actually, it's our right of ways. I mean, this is a campaign that the Friends of the Horse-Drawn campaigns, which is an affiliated group of us, are really following. But we're also really concerned about this, because the common land, already there's rocks and stones all over the place. They've dug ditches so that we can no longer park on there. In the past, we've been able to park for a couple of days on common land, just have a break, a bit of respite as we're moving, and we're just losing this land. And this is obviously going to affect gypsies and travellers, but actually it's going to affect everybody, and we need to keep hold of the land, so yeah, that's a really important issue.
That sounds really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I think we've got just a little bit of time left to do one last one. I was looking at this question that's really interesting. Tom says, at the beginning you said we don't need much. I'd like to ask, beyond the minimum we are fighting to defend now, what would a truly bright, positive situation for the GRT communities in the UK look like?
Well, one where we're just allowed to be ourselves, we're allowed to live, where we're not, where so many of us aren't trying to hide who we are just so we don't get abuse, so we don't get violence. So we don't have a government that is trying to target us in the most blatant ways. I suppose the only way, the positive vision is just us being allowed to live.
Yeah, I agree with that. As coming from the new traveller community, I mean, it's the new traveller. It's a bit of a weird name for us. I mean, we've got 3 or 4 generations of travellers on the road that weren't born on the road, but have come to live this way. And we have been generally occupying bits of land that have been neglected, that aren't used. We form communities that work together. We eat together, communal meals. We feel safe together. We face a lot of abuse, as any anarchist would know. We look different, we act different, we like different. We like to be in community, and so allowing us to be and to if there was more parking spaces, we wouldn't be staying in the same places. If you drive along any road, any A road, any B road, like, you'll see laybys that were traditional parking places that have got big boulders or been dug in so that you can't access them anymore. There's all of our traditional parking spaces, all of the ones that were traditionally used by the Romani and the Irish travellers, they've been turned into supermarkets and car parks. These were our traditional parking spaces, and they've not been replaced. And I came into this town because I had some work here, and I didn't want to park on the road. I did not feel safe going and parking on the street. I've had my truck towed away by the authorities, even though it wasn't blocking anybody, even though it was completely legal, because an 18-ton delivery truck was coming through the narrow lanes and got stuck. And instead of moving that, they just towed me away, and I had to pay a big fine to get my truck out. And it's no fun when your home goes away. We need to be safe, and we need to just be respected, not just treated as human beings, and not feared, and just allowed to get on with what we're doing. Land would be good.
Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today and giving us all of the energy and time. And I know it's something that's it takes a lot of energy to talk about these things, and it's deeply personal, so thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone who's tuned in. Once again, we have our PayPal, which this year all of the donations are going directly to the speakers and organizations taking part. So if you can, please do consider donating. And thank you so much for coming along.
And thank you for giving us a platform.
Yeah, thank you.